She visited her late husband's bench every Sunday until someone was waiting there. She hadn't spoken his name out loud in months, but every Sunday she said it quietly in her head as she sat down on the bench where they used to meet. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The bench was old, wooden, a little uneven. The plaque in the center was beginning to fade, but the words were still there if you leaned close. In loving memory of Thomas Reed, a husband, a friend, a man who never missed a Sunday. She had picked that spot because it overlooked the small pond they used to sit beside. He liked watching the ducks. He'd bring a thermos of coffee and a pack of those little powdered donuts, and they'd sit for an hour, sometimes two. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Being there together had been enough. After he passed, she kept coming. It gave her something steady to hold on to. One day a week where she knew exactly where to go and exactly what to do. She'd bring his coffee, still black, still hot. She never drank it. Just set it down beside her on the bench. The gesture mattered. It was hers. That morning had started like any other. She left the house around 10, picked up the coffee from the same little shop they used to visit, walked the same winding path through the park. The air was cooler than usual, with a thin layer of clouds above. She pulled her coat tighter as she neared the spot. But this time, something was different. Someone was sitting on the bench. She stopped a few steps away. Her heart paused for a moment. It wasn't that she was angry. It just caught her off guard. In 3 years, no one had ever been sitting there. Not once. It had always been empty. Like the world had agreed to leave that space untouched. The man looked up when he noticed her. Middle-aged, clean-shaven, wearing a dark gray coat and holding a coffee cup in both hands. He stood up quickly, polite. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't know it was taken." She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's all right," she said. "I just come here every Sunday. My husband. This was our bench." He nodded once. No awkward smile, no forced apology, just a small nod like he understood more than he let on. "I'll let you have it," he said, stepping aside. She looked at the bench, looked at him, then back again. "You don't have to leave," she said. "It's a public park." He gave a half smile. "Still, I didn't mean to intrude." She thought about insisting, thought about walking away and coming back later, but something stopped her. She wasn't sure what. "Would you mind if I sat too?" she asked. His expression didn't change much, but he nodded. "Of course." She sat on the left side, the one she always took. Set the second coffee down beside her, like always. He sat on the right. They didn't speak. Not for a while. The sound of the ducks in the pond and the occasional passing jogger filled the silence. He didn't fidget, didn't check his phone. He just sat there, quietly. She glanced sideways once or twice. He looked straight ahead. After about 15 minutes, she stood. "Well," she said softly, "I'll be going now." He nodded again. "Take care." She turned to walk away, then paused. "I'm here every Sunday," she said. He didn't respond at first, then said, "Maybe I'll see you again." She nodded, then left. As she walked back through the path, her thoughts swirled. She didn't know who he was or why he'd been there. But the bench had felt different with someone beside her. And for the first time in 3 years, she hadn't felt completely alone. She wasn't sure why she had expected the bench to be empty again. Maybe because it always had been. Maybe because part of her wanted things to return to the way they were. Quiet, predictable, familiar. But when she came around the curve in the path and saw him there again, sitting just like before, coffee in hand, she felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't annoyance. It wasn't even surprise. It was something else. Something quieter. He saw her and stood up again, just like last time. "Still yours," he said. She gave a small shake of her head. "I told you it's not." He didn't move right away, just held her gaze for a moment longer than he had last week, then slowly sat back down on his side of the bench. She walked over and took her usual spot on the left. She set the second coffee down beside her again. They sat in silence for a few minutes, not uncomfortable, just quiet. "You bring one for him?" he asked suddenly. She turned to look at him. "Yes," she said. "Every time." He nodded slowly. Didn't ask more. Didn't make it awkward. Just looked back toward the pond. "You were married long?" he asked a minute later. 34 years, she said. Almost 35. Sounds like a good stretch. It was. He sipped his coffee. "I was married once. Didn't make it past 5. She glanced at him. "I'm sorry." He shook his head lightly. Was a long time ago. Just two people trying to be something they weren't. She didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't say anything. A breeze moved through the trees. Leaves rustled. The sound of a child laughing carried across the grass. The pond was still. The ducks moved lazily near the water's edge. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a napkin, dabbed at her eyes, though she wasn't crying. It was just a habit now. "I used to hate Sundays after he died," she said. "They felt too quiet, too long." He didn't respond, just waited. "I started coming here because I didn't know what else to do. It was our spot. I guess I just needed to feel close to something that hadn't changed." He nodded. "I don't usually talk this much," she added. "Maybe you should," he said. She smiled faintly at that. "What about you?" she asked. "Why this bench?" He shrugged. "I walk the park sometimes, usually on weekends. Last week I stopped here without thinking much about it." She looked at him closely. She wasn't sure she believed him. There was something careful in the way he spoke, like he was leaving things out on purpose. But she didn't press. They sat for a while longer. Time passed slowly in the way it only did on quiet days. A few people strolled by. A couple walked a dog past them. The sky shifted from gray to something a little lighter. When she stood to leave, he stood too. "Same time next week?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Same time." He gave a small smile. "I'll bring the coffee." She didn't answer, just walked back down the path, hands in her pockets. The air felt lighter than it had that morning. Not warm, but not cold either. She noticed things she hadn't noticed in a while. The shape of the trees overhead, the sound of gravel under her shoes, the way the sky looked like it was trying to clear. It had only been a bench, but now it wasn't just hers anymore. And for reasons she didn't fully understand, she didn't mind. She didn't tell anyone about him. Not her daughter, not her sister, not the neighbor who checked in every now and then. It wasn't because she was hiding anything. It just didn't feel like something that needed to be explained yet. Some things were easier left simple. Sunday came again faster than expected. The days in between felt less heavy. Not cheerful, not full, but different. Like something small had shifted. Like there was a new corner in the routine that didn't hurt as much. She woke early, made herself tea, took longer getting ready than usual. Nothing dramatic. Just a little more care. A scarf he had once liked. A coat that fit well. It had been a while since she noticed how she looked before leaving the house. She picked up the coffee like always. 2 cups, one for Thomas, one for the bench, and maybe one for him. He was already there when she arrived. Same side of the bench, same quiet posture. He stood when he saw her, but this time he didn't offer to leave. She held up the coffee and handed him one before sitting. He took it without a word, just a small nod. That was enough. The bench creaked under them, a familiar sound. It made her chest tighten a little. Thomas used to joke that one day it would just give out and drop them straight into the dirt. She could almost hear him laughing at the thought. "Rough week?" the man asked. She shook her head. "Not rough, just quiet." He nodded. "I get that. What about you?" He gave a small shrug. "Work's slow. That's not new." "What do you do?" "Retired now. Used to run a repair shop, small engines, lawn mowers, snow blowers, that kind of thing." She looked at him with a little surprise. "Really?" He smiled. "You sound surprised." "I don't know. I guess I imagined something different." He chuckled. "Most people do." She turned to look out at the water. Thomas was in insurance. Hated it. Why'd he stick with it? Paid the bills, let us take vacations, buy decent coffee. I think he saw it as a means to an end. Never complained. They sat in silence after that. Not awkward. Just easy. The kind of silence that didn't ask to be filled. He sipped his coffee, looked at the ducks. "You said you were married 5 years?" He nodded. "We were young. Thought that was enough." "Did you stay close?" "No. She moved out west. We don't talk." She nodded slowly. He paused, then added, "We had a son." She looked over. "He lives upstate. We talk sometimes. Not often." There was a lot he didn't say in those words, but she didn't push. "Kids have their own lives," she said. "Mine calls once a week. Texts sometimes. I don't blame her. She's got enough on her plate." The man nodded again. She glanced down at the bench, ran her hand along the grain of the wood. "This bench held a lot," she said. "Arguments, laughs, plans, silence." He didn't respond, just listened. "I don't think I'm ready to stop coming." "I'm not asking you to." She turned to him. "Why do you keep showing up?" He thought for a second. "I guess it's easier to be quiet with someone else than alone." That answer sat with her for a long moment, not just in her mind, but in her chest. When it was time to leave, they stood together. She picked up the coffee cup she had placed beside her, Thomas's, and held it a second longer than usual. "Same time next week?" he asked. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Yes." She started walking. He stayed at the bench, watching the pond. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't count the steps back to her car. She kept thinking about what he said, that it was easier to be quiet with someone else than alone. She had never put it into words like that before, but now that he had, it wouldn't leave her. The days moved slowly, the way they always had. But something was different now. There was a sense of waiting, not for something big, just for Sunday, just for the bench, just to sit beside someone who didn't ask too much and didn't need her to be anything other than what she was. On Wednesday, her daughter called. They talked for 15 minutes, mostly about the weather, work, and her granddaughter's school recital. Near the end of the call, her daughter asked, "How are you, really?" "I'm all right," she said. "You sound better." "Do I?" "Yeah. I don't know, just something in your voice." She didn't explain, didn't mention the bench, or the man, or the coffee. Some things didn't need to be shared right away. That Sunday, She arrived a little earlier than usual. He was already there, but this time he wasn't sitting. He was standing next to the bench, looking out over the pond with his hands in his pockets. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Didn't think I'd beat you," she said. "I got here early. Didn't feel like sitting until you arrived." She handed him his coffee. They sat. This time it felt different. Not better or worse, just different. "Nice scarf," he said. "It was Thomas's." He looked at her, then nodded. "Fits you." She pulled it a little tighter around her neck. They watched the ducks glide across the water. A young couple passed by with a stroller. A boy rode past on a red bike. "I keep thinking this bench is going to disappear one day," she said. "Like I'll come here and it'll be gone. Someone will decide it's too old, or in the way." "They'd be making a mistake," he said. She glanced at him. "Some things deserve to stay where they are," he added, "even if they don't look new anymore." She thought about that. They didn't speak again for a while. Eventually, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo. She didn't plan to show it, but her hand moved before her mind caught up. She passed it to him. It was faded around the edges. A picture of her and Thomas sitting on that very bench. Younger, smiling, her head on his shoulder. He looked at it a long time. "You two looked good together," he said. "We were. Most of the time." He handed the photo back. "Ever feel like people forget too fast?" she asked. He nodded. "I do." She tucked the photo away. "It's strange," she said. "Sometimes I talk to him while I sit here. Just in my head. Nothing dramatic, just updates. Like he's still listening." "Maybe he is," the man said. She didn't respond. He looked at her, then said quietly, "My son hasn't spoken to me in over a year." She turned toward him. "I think I made too many mistakes. Didn't know how to show up the right way. Not after the divorce." "You still try?" "Every birthday, every holiday. I text, no response." "I'm sorry," she said. He gave a small nod. "Some things you can't fix, but you still try anyway." They sat there in that thought. When she stood to leave, she looked at him. "I'll be here next week," she said. "So will I." She started walking back the way she came. This time, she looked back once. He was still sitting on the bench, coffee in hand, eyes on the water. And for the first time since Thomas passed, she felt a little less invisible. The next Sunday, it rained. Not a heavy storm, just that steady, soft kind of rain that soaks the edges of your coat and makes everything smell like wet leaves and pavement. She almost didn't go. She looked out the window that morning, hands wrapped around a warm mug, and told herself it would be fine to stay home just this once. No one would expect her to sit on a bench in the rain. She could visit next week. Dry. Comfortable. But something about skipping it felt wrong. So she put on her boots, grabbed an umbrella, took 2 paper cups from the cupboard and stopped for coffee on the way, like always. The park was quiet. Most people had the good sense to stay indoors. The path glistened with puddles. Trees shook gently with each breeze. And there he was. Same coat, no umbrella, just sitting, like it was any other Sunday. She approached slowly. "You're really committed to this bench," she said. He looked up. Rain clung to his hair and the edges of his collar, but he smiled anyway. "Told you I'd be here." She handed him a coffee, then opened the umbrella over them both. They shifted in closer to share the space. Steam from their cups drifted upward and disappeared into the cool air. For a long time they didn't speak. She watched the water ripple. He watched the ducks dive for something unseen. "I almost stayed home," she admitted. "Would have missed good company." She glanced sideways at him. I don't like missing Sundays, she said, even when it hurts. He nodded slowly. It's strange, she went on. This bench, it used to be a place for me and Thomas. Then it became a place just for me. And now... She didn't finish the sentence, but he understood. People don't always get second chapters, he said. Most don't even look for them. She thought about that. I wasn't looking, she said. I just kept coming here because I didn't know where else to go. He took a slow sip of coffee. Sometimes not knowing is the best place to start. She chuckled quietly. You sound like you read that on a fortune cookie. I probably did. The rain eased a little, lighter now, more mist than drops. He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. I've been thinking about calling my son again, he said. She looked at him. I know what you said last time, she told him. I do, but I can't stop wondering if he's just waiting for me to try one more time. She nodded. Maybe he is. He looked down at his hands. They were rough, older, still steady. I was stubborn. After the divorce, I got caught up in my own bitterness, thought I was the one who got left behind. What changed? He exhaled slowly. I guess I started realizing how much I missed. Not just him growing up, but the little things. Baseball games, school plays, Sunday mornings. She looked down at her coffee. You can't go back, she said softly, but maybe you can go forward. They sat with that, the sound of rain in the trees, the bench worn smooth by years of use. Two people who had lost more than they could explain, quietly sharing what was left. When she stood to leave, she didn't rush. He looked up at her, waiting. Will you call him? She asked. I think I will. Good. She turned to go, then paused, reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small pack of tissues. She handed it to him. For the next time it rains. He took it with a quiet smile. Same time next week? Yes. She walked off under her umbrella. The path ahead was damp, but clear. And for the first time in years, she realized she wasn't walking away from something. She was walking toward it. The call didn't go the way he hoped. He told her the next Sunday, right after she handed him his coffee and settled in beside him on the bench. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted at the coming of fall. Leaves had started to turn at the edges. I called him, he said quietly. She turned to look at him. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just looked straight ahead. He answered, he continued. Didn't say much. Let me talk. But I could tell. He didn't want to hear it. She didn't interrupt. I told him I missed him. Told him I think about him all the time. Told him I wish I'd done more. Said I'd like to talk again sometime. He paused, took a sip of coffee. He just said, okay, and hung up. She exhaled through her nose. I'm sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I just didn't want to let another year go by, wondering if I should try. They sat for a while. The wind pushed gently across the water, and a few ducks floated silently nearby. Trying counts, she said. I guess. He leaned back a little on the bench. You know, I used to think all the big moments were loud. Weddings, anniversaries, holidays. But it's the quiet ones that stick with me now. She looked at him. Like what? She asked. Like sitting at the dinner table with him when he was 10. Watching him try to act like he wasn't proud of his drawing from school. Like brushing past him in the hallway and hearing him mumble "love you" under his breath. Small things. She nodded slowly. I remember those too, she said. Thomas had this way of humming when he made coffee. Not a song, just a low sound. I didn't even notice it until it stopped. They sat with that. Sometimes the silence between them said more than words ever could. A jogger passed. A boy chased a squirrel through the grass. Somewhere across the pond, someone was playing soft music on a speaker. "He might call you back," she said after a while. "Maybe," he replied. "If he doesn't, you still did your part." He nodded. "It matters more than I thought it would." They watched a leaf drift slowly down from a tree and land on the bench beside them. She picked it up, turned it over in her hand, then let it go again. "You know what I've realized?" she said. "I kept coming here thinking I was visiting the past, talking to Thomas, replaying our life. But lately, I think I've just been trying to remember who I am without him." He didn't respond right away, just watched her. "And who is that?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Someone who still gets up on Sundays. Someone who buys 2 coffees. Someone who looks forward to seeing a man in a weathered coat sitting on this bench." He chuckled softly. "Sounds familiar." They didn't need to say anything more. Not every week brought something new. Sometimes it was the routine that mattered. The showing up, the sitting, the quiet. When she stood to leave, he stood too. They faced each other. "Thank you for listening," he said. "You always listen to me," she replied. He watched her walk away, the scarf she wore catching the breeze. And for the first time in a long while, the ache in his chest felt just a little lighter. Not gone, but lighter. The weather had turned cold enough that she wore gloves that morning. She held the coffee cups carefully, one in each hand, as she made her way down the path. The grass had a thin layer of frost on it, and her breath came out in short white clouds. She wasn't sure if he'd be there. Some weeks were like that now. They were both getting older. Sometimes he had appointments, sometimes he was tired. Neither of them had ever said they'd come every Sunday. They just kept showing up. And he was there. Same bench, same coat. Hands tucked into his sleeves, hat pulled low over his ears. He looked up as she approached, his face lighting up just a little. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. She handed him the coffee and sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." They smiled at the same time. That quiet kind of smile that says more than words. It was colder than usual, but they didn't mention it. They sat, like always, watching the water. Ducks were still there, huddled closer together now. The trees were nearly bare. After a few minutes, he spoke. "He called me yesterday." She turned to look at him. "My son, out of the blue, just said he was driving and felt like talking." She blinked. "What did he say?" "Asked how I'd been, what I was doing with myself these days. It wasn't long, 10 minutes maybe, but it felt like a door opening." She nodded slowly. "That's good," she said. "I didn't say much, just listened. He told me about work, his kids. Said maybe next month we could get lunch." He sipped his coffee, his hands trembling just a little. "I said yes, of course, but I didn't want to sound too eager. Didn't want to scare him off." She smiled. "You didn't." "I hope not." He said something at the end. He said, "Maybe you weren't ready before. Maybe you are now." She looked at him carefully. "And are you?" He didn't answer right away. "I think I'm starting to be," he said. "It's hard letting go of who I used to be, but harder pretending I haven't changed." The bench creaked under them as he shifted his weight. "I don't want to waste what's left of my time carrying regrets," he said. "I've done that long enough." She looked down at her gloves. "I never got that chance with Thomas," she said. There were no last conversations, no second chances. He was just gone. He turned toward her. But you showed up anyway, every week. You kept going. It's what you do when you love someone, she said, even when they're not here anymore. The wind blew across the pond, sending small ripples toward the shore. I used to think grief was something you got through, she added. Now I think it's something you carry, like an old coat. Doesn't always fit, but you wear it anyway. He was quiet for a moment. I've always thought it was strange, he said finally. How two people who never planned to meet can end up meaning something to each other. It's not so strange, she said. Not when you've both been through something. They watched a squirrel dart along the fence line, pausing now and then to search for whatever it had buried weeks earlier. She glanced at him again. You should go to lunch with your son, she said. I will. Don't wait for the perfect time. There isn't one. He nodded slowly. They finished their coffee in silence. The cold didn't feel as sharp anymore. Maybe it was the company. Maybe it was just what happens when two people decide to keep showing up, even when it hurts. When she stood to leave, he stood with her. He looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. So she reached out and touched his arm, just for a moment. I'm proud of you, she said. And then she walked away, the frost crunching under her feet, the wind at her back. The bench was wet from the early morning rain. She had come anyway, holding a small towel in her bag to wipe it down before she sat. The clouds still hung low, heavy and gray, but there was no more rain for now, just the soft sound of water dripping from the trees and the distant hum of traffic beyond the park. She wasn't sure if he'd show up. They hadn't made plans. They never did. There was never a promise, never a schedule, just a quiet understanding that if either of them could come, they would. She sat down slowly, sipping from her coffee cup and watching the path. It was quieter today. Fewer joggers, fewer children. The cold had set in more deeply, and the wind had a sharp edge to it. She waited 10 minutes, then 15. At the 20-minute mark, she started thinking maybe it would just be her today. That was all right. She'd had those Sundays before. Some days you sit with someone, some days you sit with the silence. But just as she was about to get up and start walking back, she heard the sound of footsteps on the gravel path. He was wearing a heavier coat this time, collar turned up against the wind. His hat was pulled low, and a scarf covered most of his face, but she knew it was him right away. He stopped a few steps from the bench. I almost didn't come, he said. She stood up and stepped aside so he could sit. I thought maybe you wouldn't, she said. I was nervous. About lunch. About everything. Did it happen? He nodded. Yesterday. We met at this diner he likes. Brought his daughter with him. She's 8. Her eyes brightened. How did it go? He took a deep breath before answering. It was awkward. At first we didn't know what to say. He ordered pancakes. I ordered coffee. His daughter drew pictures on a napkin, and for a while it felt like I didn't belong at the table. She didn't speak, just let him continue. But then she showed me the drawing. It was of a man and a little girl holding hands. She said it was me and her. He paused, looking out at the water. I think that's when it changed. He saw me smile at her, and I saw something soften in his face. He looked down at his gloved hands. We talked a little after that. Not about the past, just normal things. He told me what school she goes to, what kind of books she likes. I told him about this bench, about how I've been spending Sundays here. Her brow lifted slightly. You told him about me? He nodded. I didn't say much, Just that I met someone who listens, someone who doesn't make it harder to speak. She smiled faintly. That's a nice way to put it. I don't know where it's going, with him, with any of it, but it felt like something started, something small. She watched him for a moment, then turned back toward the water. That's how healing works, I think, she said. Not in big moments, just in slow steps. They sat again in silence, the air heavier with moisture. A squirrel darted across the path. The wind shook the last few leaves from a tree behind them. I still miss Thomas, she said softly. I know. I still talk to him sometimes, in my head, when I sit here. That's not strange. I thought maybe it was, at first, but now I think it's just part of carrying him forward. He leaned back against the bench. I think we carry a lot of things, he said. People, regrets, hopes. They come with us, whether we want them to or not. She nodded. But lately, he added, it feels a little lighter. The wind picked up. A light drizzle started to fall again, but neither of them moved. They just sat there, side by side, carrying what they carried, together. The bench looked different in the spring. The grass had turned a deep green, and tiny yellow flowers had pushed up along the edges of the path. The trees had leaves again, full and alive. Birds were louder now, darting between the branches, calling back and forth like they were part of something urgent. She noticed it all as she walked the familiar path, the way the sun filtered through the leaves, the warmth on her arms, the scent of rain still lingering from the night before. She had brought only one coffee today. He was already there when she arrived. He stood when he saw her, brushing something from the seat beside him. There was a small paper bag next to his feet. I brought something, he said. She raised an eyebrow. What's the occasion? No occasion, he said. Just thought maybe it was time. She sat down slowly. Time for what? He opened the paper bag and pulled out a small framed photo. It was old, slightly faded. A man in uniform smiling at the camera, his arm around a woman with short hair and a warm, tired smile. Thomas? He asked. She nodded, eyes fixed on the picture. That was taken the week before he shipped out. We had dinner at the place on 4th. He hated taking photos. He handed her the frame gently. I thought maybe he should sit with us today. She didn't say anything at first, just held the frame in her hands, running a thumb along the edge. Thank you, she said after a long pause. They sat there like that for a while, the photo placed between them, the breeze moving softly around them. A boy walked by on a scooter, then a couple walking their dog. Neither of them noticed the bench, but for the two sitting there, it was everything. I've been thinking, he said, about next Sunday. She turned slightly toward him. My son invited me to church, then lunch after. That's good. I told him yes. It's the first time in years I've been invited to anything on a Sunday. She smiled. You should go. I will, but I'll miss this. We'll still come here, she said. Maybe not every week, but enough. He nodded. They sat again in silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, just the kind that settles in when nothing urgent needs to be said. A few minutes later he spoke again. When I first saw you here, I didn't think much of it. Just someone visiting a bench. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't think it had anything to do with me. She looked at him, curious. But every week, there you were, rain or shine, sitting here with your coffee, like it mattered. It did, she said. I know that now. He reached down and pulled something else from the paper bag. A second photo, this one newer. A little girl with a missing front tooth, holding a drawing. She stood beside a man in a gray coat with tired eyes and a hopeful smile. She asked if she could visit the park sometime, he said. I think I want her to know about this place, about what it meant. She looked at the picture, then back at him. I think that's a good idea. They stood up together. He handed her the photo of Thomas. She tucked it carefully into her bag. They didn't make a plan. They didn't talk about next week. But something in the way they stood said it didn't need to be said. They would see each other again. Not always on a bench, not always with coffee, but somewhere. Because some people come into your life when you think everything is finished, and then they show you what's still left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.